People will spend their 20s achieving and just running these patterns and like going out there into the world and trying to doing all the stuff they think they need to do externally to get the love that they've always wanted.
Yep.
While also playing that out in relationships, and their romantic relationships, of course,
100%.
and realize like, oh, at some level, like, it's actually not working.
One of the things that we talk about is that sometimes it seems odd because the script of being a good son is not the same thing sometimes as being a good man.
The child benefits the more attachment you give them. And if you stop threatening attachment and you use your relationship to influence them, it takes more effort, but the relationship stays intact to the point where if you do it right, they get to their teenage years and they don't hate you and want to run away from you. John Wang, you're a friend of mine, and I'm stoked to be having this conversation with you. You are one of these guys who, in my opinion, in any room full of people, you would be nominated as most interesting guy in the room.
Thank you. I don't know if I could claim that crown just because you and we have been in lots of rooms with some very interesting people.
Yeah, you might not win every time. You're in the running every time.
I was self-nominated every time. That's that's what I say.
I feel like every time I get into a real conversation with you, I hear a very interesting story. Every time I read one of your social posts that is going viral and you have a way of capturing people in that way, it's a very interesting story about something that you decided to do with yourself as an experiment, as a social experiment, as a testing of your own limits. And in all honesty, one of the reasons why I asked to do this with you is because I just want to hear more of those stories and just have a one-on-one with you and hear some of this stuff. And the other reason is because you've been just expressing yourself bigger and bigger in the world recently. You and I were in the same brotherhood, the Arca Brotherhood. And you took what you learned there and what you created in Arca and have started applying it to another community and blossoming on TikTok and getting out there. Like it's been a sensation.
Thank you for that. And I appreciate the kind words there. I'll speak on the first part, which is stories and experiences, because I think that's what we're here for. I have this deep belief that we as human beings, like if we have the capacity to get really true to who we are and our experiences, it's such a privilege and just a pleasure that we can experience each other and the moments that we get, the stories that we encounter, all these different things. I think that I've done a few things that other people haven't done, things like walking on airplanes or, been mistaken to be a terrorist, which I ended up giving a TEDx talk about, or just my own personal experiences, like, a year of radical honesty, stuff like that, all because I just got really curious. Like, what would that look like for myself? And I think that's the core of it. And coming up with the second thing, Arca, I am so grateful for men's work and the work that we have done in the process, in that container of being in men's groups. And absolutely, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm a big believer that if we were to learn something, it is our responsibility to share that gift, because that's given to us. That's, whatever it is that we learn in the process, like it's what I call the medicine. It's kind of like when you climb up to the top of the mountain and you get a medicine, it is our responsibility to go out there and spread it as far as we can. So clearly that's what you're doing.
And another thing that I respect about you is that you're a man of action. Like, you get curious and you ask questions, but then you go out and you run trials and you climb the mountain. You go get the medicine so that you can bring it back and give it to people, And I saw that in Arca. You were a new captain, and you must have been 6 months into being a captain, and you said, "Hey, is there a manual?" And we said, "No, there's no manual." And you're like, "Okay, well, I'm going to write one." And you wrote a manual.
And I had no right to write a manual at the time. Like, I had no right to do it. No, and that's something I really realized, that so many of us are waiting for permission.
Yeah.
We're waiting for someone to tap us on the shoulder and be like, you're ready now. And I think that I kept waiting for permission all my life. And then one day I was like, what if I stopped?
Yeah. What was that day? Because one of the questions I want to ask is like, how does a person become like John Wang? How does one of my intros to you was like when we added each other on Facebook, and I saw that your profile pic was you standing on top of an airplane while it did a 360 in the air, or like a barrel roll, I guess is what it's called. Yeah. And I was like, who the fuck is this guy?
Yeah. Scariest story. Scariest thing I've ever done. It's called wing walking. If you have your phone around, go Google it. You literally climb on top of the wings of the plane, and it does tricks, and you scream your lungs out, and it's amazing, and it's fun, and it completely recalibrates your fear scale.
Yeah, I bet. Are you like strapped in to like a snowboard in bindings? Like
when you're up there?
Yeah.
No, you have to actually, because they don't allow you to put on so what it is that imagine a propeller plane, and you have to climb out of one of the co-pilot seats while it's flying, because they can't strap you in before you go up. Because then the aerodynamics are all messed up, and then the plane will crash. They can't take off. Exactly. So we actually went through training. They trained us to do this beforehand, and you had to memorize all these steps of like exactly where you put your hand, exactly where you put your feet, so that you can get into position. And then you strap this little belt around you once you're on top of the wing, and then it starts doing these loop-de-loops.
Yeah.
So you're experiencing it.
So you're like hooked in.
Yeah.
Crazy. But the question is, when did you become that guy? When like, I don't know if you have a turning point, but like, when did you become the guy who's like, "Hey, I'm just going to go do it. I'm going to go do stuff. I'm going to go create. I'm going to be a man of action."
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. I was in my early 20s when a friend of mine who passed away from cancer. He was 23 years old. And I think I was 22, 21.
Yeah.
And when you're 21, 22 years old, death is just not a thing.
Yeah.
Like you think it would never happen to you, and you romanticize it, but like it's just not a thing. And so when he passed away, it was a really sudden thing for us. Basically, like from, hey, let's go camping in a few weeks' time. Like that sounds great. To, hey guys, I just got a diagnosis. I might not be coming back. And then us going like, oh, come visit you. To, oh, he's not here anymore.
Wow.
Was about 3.5 weeks.
Oh my goodness.
So it shook me at the time. I went, what would I do in my life if I had a month left?
Yeah.
So I sat down and wrote a list, and I wrote down every single thing, like one of the bucket list styles. And I'm like, I'll go, bungee jumping. I'll call my parents and tell them everything that I want to apologize for.
Yeah. Clear it out.
Clear it out.
Right.
And go eat at these fancy restaurants I can. And I was like I was still a student. I didn't have much money, but I just was like, let me just do that, because life is so short. And I did that. And then I went, okay, a month passed. Now what? And then I wrote down, what would it look like for a year? So I literally set a little countdown clock on my computer. So every morning it would tell me how many days I had left. And it was one of the most interesting experiences, because when you have a countdown clock, everything that you thought was important stops being important. Mm-hmm. Like all the people I thought I had to impress, all the people I wanted to spend time with because I thought that, this is going to help me. And all that, really the word is bullshit.
Yeah.
Suddenly vanishes very quickly. And it was actually quite shocking how immediate it was. Mm-hmm. And it becomes very real. Like what's important is the relationships. It's people.
Yeah.
And so I started checking off a list of who do I want to spend a lot more time with? And it became about what kind of experiences do I want to have? Yeah. Not for the sake of the name, because you can't take that with you, but just like that will be a great experience.
And there's also this piece around how you show up, right? Death has this way of, I feel like the gift of death is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Where it reminds you what's important in life, and it reminds you about how you want to be remembered and the things that you remember about that person that's now gone. Right. And it's not so much about their achievements or how much money they had or how much power they'd acquired in the world, but how they showed up, what the gift of who they are, the beautiful traits in their personality, the times that they took time out of their day to help you, or their generosity or their empathy, right? Like those are the things we remember, these like really sweet moments. Right. And so there's this piece around like, okay, I remember who's important to me and I want to spend more time with them and have rich experiences. But I feel like it also makes you more conscious about what you want to work on in yourself, because you can see what's important. It's not so important that you amass a certain amount of money and power and wealth or have a certain amount of sex in your life, but how you are with people and how you show up, your level of presence and what you give to people from a very real, generous place. That's what you want to give, because you remember that's what you received from that person, their best qualities. I feel like every friend that I've lost, I've kind of like downloaded some of their good qualities and really tried to like just lock them in there, just really integrate them, and then carry that person with me in who I am. And it sounds like that's what happened for you at this time. And what a powerful time for that to happen, right? When you're 22, 23, like you're really evolving at a fast pace at that age, right? And the world is your oyster, and you've got lots of courage to do wild things. And in some ways, like I feel like your growth can be exponential at that age, because you're just you're ready for it. You know?
Yeah, and I love the way you put that. The idea is gifts, because we all massively undervalue the gifts that we have. I really, really believe that. One of the superpowers I like to say I have is when I see somebody, I see the best version of who they are. As in, I can usually get a sense that there is this beautiful shining light, and I have never met somebody who I could talk to who I don't see that light with. And it's just a matter of whether or not they see it. And that's the thing, is that we literally are walking balls of energy that constantly are influencing everyone around us. And we could be influencing them in the way that they need to be influenced, in a positive way, or the opposite. But we get to make that choice. And as you say, we leave that behind as a legacy. It's not where our name is printed. It's the energy that we leave behind to other people. Yeah.
And you're wearing this shirt, Big Asian Energy. Big Asian Energy.
Shout out. That's my brand. Big Asian Energy. Yeah.
And I think by now it's probably obvious to people listening that you're a coach. And it's just like, it's built into who you are. You see the best in people and you want to get that out. You want to water that seed and get some light on it and like get that thing to sprout. And you've worked with youth who are working to be their best, to get into the best universities and that kind of thing. And tell me, what does Big Asian Energy mean?
What is Big Asian Energy? Yeah.
I go into your office and it's like the entire wall is just Big Asian Energy.
Big Asian Energy.
It's got this.
It's a good reminder. I'm Asian American, Canadian. I grew up. I'm Taiwanese. My parents immigrated here when I was 6 or 7 years old, and one of the core values when you're Asian American is essentially humility. Is to kind of like play it quiet. Don't take it too much noise. Don't inconvenience other people. Do well in school is always like one core value, but like, a joke that you see everywhere where it's like, be a doctor, or you can be a doctor or a lawyer or like an engineer.
You have a very limited set of professions you can get into. Yeah.
And a big part of that comes from the fact that I think there's this, because if you go to Asia, it's highly competitive. It's a hyper-competitive environment.
Yeah.
So, my parents, when they immigrated here, they sacrificed a lot to get here. I'm really grateful for that. But because of that sacrifice, they also really imparted the importance of like, stay safe because we gave you the sacrifice, and try to find the safest path to success possible. And success being financial success.
Keep your head down.
Keep your head down. Don't raise your hand too much. the bird that flies first gets shot first. It was literally the lesson that my dad told me about. We have so many sayings like that, like the tree that's biggest gets blown over by the wind. Yeah, the nail that sticks up gets hammered down. And there's so much, because it's collectivist culture.
Yeah.
Not that there's anything wrong with that, but
it was a little bit kind of like the opposite of American culture.
Very much the opposite.
It's like
individualistic. And
be the biggest tree.
Exactly.
Be the first bird.
Yeah. The wheel that squeaks gets the oil.
Yeah.
Right. So I realized that like there's nothing wrong with it. Like that humility is fantastic. Yeah. But the extreme of everything is oftentimes a detriment. Like
is it toxic humility or is it humility that you're describing?
Exactly. Like are we being humble, or are we just hiding who we are? And it's sometimes, are we hiding who we are because we're doing it for the benefit of someone else out of a genuine kindness and compassion and support of our culture and those around us? Or are we hiding ourselves because it comes from a place of fear of being seen?
Right.
So where the idea behind Big Asian Energy comes from really was just like, it's self-authenticity. It's owning who you are. It's owning all the parts of who you are and not being afraid to be loud with it, not being afraid to express it, that it's not an inconvenience to have that sense of identity and pride.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think that's actually a big one. It's a balance between, and the opposite of that, right? We're talking about individuality. The opposite of that is arrogance. And that's also not, because that's also not really who we are. It's also not authentic. The issue is, are we being authentic to our core values?
And there's nothing necessarily arrogant about Big Asian Energy. It's
about
how you show up.
Yeah.
And it's about raising yourself out of something that's been conditioned. Where really like what you were taught was little Asian energy. Right. And I feel like I understand the culture as best I can that your parents came into over here at that time, where it really wasn't safe to be big with your Asian energy.
Oh no.
Right. And, and we're not out of the woods. Like, we were talking last year and you were posting a lot about all of the attacks that were happening on Asian Americans. Yeah. Right. Like the attacks were like way up during COVID, right? Because of this whole, I guess, blaming COVID on China.
Yep.
So it's not over. That's this sort of like prejudiced, racist tendency that people have to go after one group of people. But it also has never been safer than now to, it feels like the time is now to be big with your Asian energy and big with whatever if you're a part of a minority or whatever you want to identify as, being big with that energy. Right? There's kind of a renaissance happening now.
100%. Right? I oftentimes joke around with my friends because they ask me, it's like, is it okay if I wear a shirt that says like big whatever energy?
Big
and
white
I'm like,
energy?
Yeah. I mean, it's really, it's like, who are you? Like, what is it that you're stepping into your authenticity? And I think that's the core word, is that self-acceptance piece, right? Is that self-compassion piece, is that self-love piece, and being unapologetic in your imperfections. Like that can coexist with, I'm working on myself, but I'm also like, this is who I am as I am.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I think you were a part of a group that was telling a story about how you needed to be small.
Yeah.
I wasn't. I was a white kid that grew up in the suburbs, but in my home, I was told to be small. I was told to not be on camera, not be on stage. Who am I to take energy from the brothers? I had 2 older brothers. And so I would hide at home, and then I would be extra big at school and get in trouble. So I was always on behavior contracts. But I think my shirt would just say Big Ben Energy.
Big Ben Energy.
Right? If it was really about owning it.
Yeah.
Big Ben Energy.
Big Ben Energy. Yeah. Big U energy.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. It's such an interesting, I love the word that you're using there, because it is true. It's a familial role. It's a familial contract. Like growing up, we get handed these contracts of who we're supposed to be. And we are handed these on a regular basis by our parents without ever even thinking about it. So you're a new dad. We're just chatting about this.
Let's talk parenting.
Before this. Yes. I love that. So talking about Asian parenting and my experience with my own parents, don't get me wrong, I love my parents. I really, really do. Like, they are just such sweet, amazing people who are doing the best with what they had.
And they gave you so much.
And they gave me so much.
Right? Like, they came over, like, what they went through.
The sacrifices.
Yeah.
Holy moly. And at the same time, I had a friend coming over from Norway the other day, and he stayed here for a few days, and he had a little toddler, like 2-3 years old. And we went out to the playgrounds, where we live and got to play. And I noticed something that kind of like surprised me was the kid would go off and she's adorable. She's like a 2-3 year old toddler. Her name is Maya. She's like jumping on playgrounds and, dancing around, all that kind of stuff. And then when it was time for us to go, because we had a dinner reservation, the parents kind of went up to her and being like, Maya, like, are you, we would like to go. Is it, we want to go eat. Are you ready to go? And she said, no. And they were like, okay. And I just remember my jaw dropped, right? Like, where I come from, that's not an ask.
Yeah.
That's you will be lucky that you are notified.
Yeah.
It's 100%. The idea is it's time to go or else.
Yeah. You do as I say.
Exactly. And I was amazed, and and they set boundaries. There was rules. There was a little bit of like this is it, but there was always explanation.
Yeah.
And there was so much agency, and you could tell her entire world, like, she was being taught that she had a right to speak up. Mm-hmm. She was being taught that her opinions and her boundaries actually existed and mattered.
Yeah.
Which was unheard of for me as a child, all the way until mine was 23.
Yeah. And for 99% of people listening, right? It's like your parents basically dominate you into doing what they say.
Yeah. Here's a script was the idea. It's an invisible, like, we're all past this invisible script of this, you're a child and this is what it is. And one of the things, I have an Asian men's group that I run. And
what are you calling it?
Waking Dragons.
Oh,
Waking Dragons.
Waking
Dragons. Waking Dragons, right? Yeah.
Solid.
I'm so stoked about it. We have a whole program and training, all of that. But anyway, so one of the things that we talk about is that sometimes it seems odd because the script of being a good son is not the same thing sometimes as being a good man. And this is where a lot of guys, I think, when we are, talking about evolving man, like when we are getting to that point of we are stepping into our masculinity, it's confusing. Why do we want these ideas? There's the concept called Rite of Passage, right? Why is it so important? Because the Rite of Passage was supposed to be the transference between being a good son to being a good man. And that's also being a good daughter and being a good woman. Mm-hmm. Just being a good child and being a good person. And what we're seeing in new parents who are understanding that actually you can still teach self-discipline and self-control while also teaching them agency is that we're seeing them as people. And the script that we're teaching them is that, no, you have the right to say no. You have to understand there's consequences, but you have the right. And you have the right to understand and navigate and build relationships. And that is, to me, well, I've never seen that before up to that point, was actually quite mind-blowing.
Yeah. It is mind-blowing when you see it. And was your first thought like, this doesn't work? Like, you can't do that?
I think my first thought was just like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
But then, the question did come up. I was like, are you now teaching the kid to disobey you?
Yeah. Like, who runs the show here? Like,
Yeah, exactly.
That's how my mind works too. I'm like, well, I mean, you can't have the monkeys running the zoo.
Yeah.
Right? This sort of old school mindset around it, that there can't be this sort of collaboration going on where there's like a relationship. And I don't know everything about parenting. I have an almost 4-month-old daughter, but my wife and I have been looking into what's the latest in parenting science and the studies, and also debriefing our own childhoods.
Sure.
And what we've seen in what our generation grew up with is that if we weren't behaving in a way that our parents liked, they would threaten attachment, right?
Yeah.
Gabor Mate talks about this a lot, right? It's like, if you don't behave in this way, we are going to remove some part of your connection with us that you like. We're going to disapprove. We might even lock you in a room, or we may just turn away from you. You know, if you're having this emotion, or if you want this, but we're not going to give it to you. And you're having a feeling about that. Nuh-uh, we're going to turn away, and we might even scald you for having that desire, that feeling. And so there's this like breaking of attachment all the time that happens between parents and kids. And the results of broken attachment is dysfunctional attachment in adulthood,
100%.
right? You get hyper anxious people in relationship, and you get hyper avoidant people in relationship. And sometimes you get disorganized people that are sort of bouncing back and forth between the two, and they can't figure out how to manage their relationships. And we're also learning that on the other side of that, you actually, the child benefits the more attachment you give them. And if you stop threatening attachment and you use your relationship to influence them, it takes more effort, but the relationship stays intact to the point where, you know, Gordon Neufeld teaches this, where like, if you do it right, they get to their teenage years and they don't hate you and want to run away from you.
Yeah.
Right. Which a lot of my friends felt about their parents, including me.
Sure. Yeah.
Where, you know, I didn't trust them. You know, they were just disciplinarians at that point, trying to control me. And I was like, get away from me. Right. I didn't feel like I had autonomy in my own home. And so giving kids proper attachment is huge, you know, and apparently they can't have too much, right? You're not going to make an adult baby out of someone by giving them the attachment that they need all through their childhood.
100%.
That's what we thought would happen, is like, hey, if we're not telling kids to grow up all the time and like trying to get them to grow up, they won't grow up into adults, right? And so we start from the beginning. When they're babies and they cry, we leave them in a crib, we let them cry it out, right? That was the old way. Just like, grow up.
Deal with it. Deal with it. Back in my day.
And there's another way. There's a way where you can actually just give the love and you meet their needs, you give them autonomy
and they become
age.
Stronger. I think the belief is that if you give them too much love, that they'll become weaker and dependent, but it's the opposite. Like they become stronger because now they have permission to trust themselves, knowing that you're their anchor. And as a parent, that's what you need to be, is you're their anchor. They need to know that, like, yes, I can go and explore, take risks, jump on an airplane that does loop-de-loops, and know that that doesn't risk the basis of their love with connection with you. And I think this is a big thing. You know, we, as part of the training that I created, I identify these 6 patterns. These are archetypal patterns that we see most often. Now, this is because I'm dealing with Asian people that we see, but this is, I think, universal.
This is great. I really want to get into this. It's the 6 patterns of unintegrated men. Right?
Unintegrated men, exactly. That's right. Yeah. So we see these 6 big patterns, and the patterns are fixer, which is kind of like a caretaker. Like, let me fix everyone around me, so that way they stay with me. This is the unspoken contract of the nice guy.
The
right?
nice guy.
Let me go fix your patterns. Let me go fix your relationship. These guys are always self-abandoning, but if you need help, they're there at 3 a.m. But that also becomes kind of weird, because they're there until they're not. They're there until a couple of weeks later, where suddenly they're really resentful about how the fact that, like, I'm always giving, and they'll have this explosion.
They give too much.
They give too much because they never really cared about themselves in that process, because they're trying to give to get.
Right? Give to get. And they probably grew up in a home where that was needed.
100%.
Right? I know a lot of nice guys who grew up in homes where they had to manage the dynamics, and they were taking care of mom in some way.
Always.
Right?
Yeah. And that abandonment, that's exactly what comes up, is that, like, don't leave me. If I keep providing value, then you can't leave me. That was my pattern. I remember working with a therapist, and there was I started seeing that in my own relationship back then, which was not a healthy relationship. And she said something that blew my mind. And she's like, because the belief is, if you need me, then it doesn't matter if you want me. And that blew my mind.
It's more secure. Right?
Because it's like, it's okay. I don't need to worry about it because I have money, or I have the solution, or I can solve your problems. So let me solve your problems so much more that I can feel safe.
And again, parents will do that with their kids.
100%. Right. And that's the thing. That's the pattern we play out. So there's the fixer. We also see the confidant, which is like the quintessential nice guy, but much more passive. They're not trying to solve everyone, but they're just trying to be your best friend. right? We see that a lot. We see the charmer.
Getting in the friend zone.
Those people are born in the friend zone because they're afraid to do anything but like to test any kind of boundaries. I have no boundaries.
Yeah.
I have no boundaries, right? Like they have no backbone, the people pleasers. And like, this is not a statement against a person, but a behavior. And that behavior comes from that lack, that fear. And then we see the charmer, which is, let me like be the party, the life of the party.
The funny guy.
Funny guy, happy, fun guy. I never have a bad emotion in my life. I'm never angry. I'm never sad. I'm never all these things, at least not in front of anyone else. And they're like surrounded by people and perpetually lonely.
Yeah.
We definitely see a lot of, there's the rebel, which is going the opposite direction, which is like, I'm just close everyone else off and fight against everyone else because I'm better than everyone else. It's like there's this challenger.
The
identity.
jerk. It's almost like the jerk.
100%. The jerk.
Yeah.
There's a cynical and I'm like, nobody understands me, right? Like we see that. There's the commander who is the micromanager. Let me control everyone else around me, right? And micromanage and get into everybody's business. Oh man, I grew up with all
that. You had a manager, or what was it called?
The manager, commander.
The commander.
Because they're like, I know best. And you don't understand. Let me come in. They're almost the opposite of the fixer, right? Like they're like trying to just take control of everyone else's.
Older sister.
Yeah, you called it. Like we're good now. Like we've gone through all that.
Yeah.
But there was definitely a time where that was that dynamic, right? And then the final one is the intellectual, and this is where you see that really highly competent perfectionist. Who is just like achiever, little overachiever, right? Achieve. They're, really it depends. It could be any kind of field they want to go in. They could be the athlete. They could be the lawyer or whatever it is. But like their whole life is their achievement because they're afraid that when they are not achieving, when they're not perfect, then they won't be loved.
Yeah, my dad would identify with that one. He became a doctor. He was told, if he didn't become a doctor, that he didn't have any value in his family. His dad was a doctor. His older brother was a doctor. Man. Older brother was already in med school when my dad was like 6 or 7. So he was like looking up to this other brother who was in med school, and they were like, "You got to be like him."
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And he still lives with that. He still holds that. So, yeah, we're all given these sort of different scripts that we have to follow by our parents who had those scripts passed down to them. How do we escape that? How do we find our true selves and break out of that? How did you do that?
For me, the process really comes down to looking at that inner child wound and giving it love. So really the simple answer to that is actually learning to be that parent for yourself. Right. Because what we keep looking externally for in our, in the people we date or we get into relationships with, or our friends, our work, like those are all relationships. And what we keep looking externally for to give that need of, that parental thing we're talking about, like when we're kids and we were taught that if you weren't this version, whatever that is, if you weren't fixing the problems in our family, being the family therapist, that was my role, right? Family therapist. If you weren't, achieving, getting those grades, right? That was my sister's role. Like she was the overachiever. If you weren't hitting these metrics, then love is withheld.
Yes.
So we grow up feeling that fear of, I just want that love. And for me, it was going through the process of learning that like, I got to be the one to give that love. Nobody else can. Yeah. Literally nobody else can actually replace that. And when that desire, that anger, that whatever feeling comes up, it's really a process of sitting with it and learning to build a relationship with yourself again as the parent and say, I'm here. I'm never going anywhere. My love for you is unconditional. You are always good enough. You don't have to be better, different, or more to be loved.
Yeah.
And the first time I said that to myself, those exact words, which is, I don't have to be better, different, or more to be loved, I literally just sat down and started sobbing. Because it was the first time I really felt like, oh my God, like that was what I was looking for.
Yeah.
And it was weird because for a long time I was just, I hit all these marks, right? I had like start a business, made all this money and all these things. And none of it really mattered until that came back.
Very common. People will spend their 20s achieving and just running these patterns and like going out there into the world and trying to doing all the stuff that they think they need to do externally to get the love that they've always wanted.
Yep.
While also playing that out in relationships, and their romantic relationships, of course,
100%.
and realize like, oh, at some level, like, it's actually not working.
Yeah.
Like I'm actually not getting what I truly am looking for.
Yeah.
And then when you look inward, that's when you find it. You know, it's interesting about love because just looking at our little baby that we've got at home, I realize how important love is as a thing that connects us to her. If there wasn't love here, it's too much work, honestly. And in the wild, basically, you could say that without love, she would die. Because she would be neglected by us. We would be busy taking care of our own needs, and we
100%.
wouldn't have that draw to care for her. And so, oh, there's a hammer drill. Great. Hopefully it doesn't come through.
Not, yeah.
Love actually becomes this thing that sustains life, that keeps her alive. And then, you know, it also becomes security and inclusion in the tribe, which is originally the family, and then it becomes the peer group. And love and acceptance and that social security is like, it's everything, right?
Yep.
And then we have it used as a chip to get us to do what we're supposed to do as children, right?
Yep.
It gets withheld and used as a currency. And we realize how not futile, but maybe feeble, or love is a limited resource then.
Yeah.
And we're like, oh God, I
You
have
gotta
to
hoard
like,
it.
I gotta like do all this stuff to like get the love,
Yeah.
right? And we don't just shut that off when we become adults and start operating in a different way. We carry all of that into our adult lives, always trying to win back the love, right? And Harville and Helen Hendricks wrote this book, Getting the Love You Want, because they saw that married couples married for 20, 30 years, were still trying to get the love they always wanted from their parents, from their partner. And their partner wasn't hearing them.
Because they're doing the same thing.
The partner's doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And so they have this way of sort of teaching how to get the love you always wanted. And they have all these processes, but what you're describing here is kind of the gist of it. First, you want to see what you identify as. Is it the fixer, the confidant, the charmer, the rebel, the nice guy, the jerk? Usually a combination of those. And then look deeper. What's the source? Oh, where's the little guy who's screaming out to get the love that he wants? You know, and you got to go find him on your own journey. Go do a bunch of breath work or some psychedelics, or go to Landmark, or do some therapy, or do all the above, and find that little guy, and then learn how to give yourself the love. Right? That's the best way. Learn to give yourself that love so that you can go into all the rest of your relationships, not trying to essentially, you know, play the relationship so that you get the love you always wanted. You can come in integrated. You can come in sort of like free, let's say.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that's the journey, is like learn to give yourself the love you want. So that you can then be who you ultimately are here to become. Right.
You started with such a great question, which is, you know, talking about that, the little 2-year-old, my friend, which is what happens, like, what if you give them too much love? I feel like we have that question for ourselves. It's a funny thing when people talk about self-love, because there's almost, you know, there's the people who understand it and there's the people who don't understand it yet. And the reaction I oftentimes see from that is, there's like, okay, you love yourself, then you lose all motivation.
Right.
And it's the truth is, it's like, what I learned was, it's the exact opposite.
What that mindset is you playing the game with yourself that your parents always played.
Exactly.
I can't, don't love yourself.
No.
Because
You haven't earned it yet.
Yeah.
You haven't earned it yet. Why? Why do you deserve to feel good about yourself? Oh man, if we had a tape recorder that can record what our inner critic says about ourselves anytime and you read the transcript, we would be shocked.
It's ugly for most people. Yeah.
It is mean. And you know what the interesting about the inner critic is that it's coming from a place of love. A twisted version of it. It's trying to protect you because that's the pattern that we took on.
Yeah, like your parents loved you.
Yeah.
My parents love me.
100%. Yeah.
And they played out these patterns that were sent down from the generations, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, this isn't about blaming.
No,
right?
no, it's not. Because again, blame is yet another form of losing the point.
Yeah, this is about evolving.
It's about evolving,
right?
Yeah, as men and as women, as all of us.
Yeah,
yeah.
Okay. ACE. I want to touch on ACE because you know, you and I talked a little bit before we started here about ACE, and I feel like it's a really good structure that can be applied in so many places. So tell me why you use ACE and what it is.
So ACE, so the six archetypes we just talked about was born from ACE. So picture a triangle, and then on the very sort of left-hand side of it, you wrote A standing for assertiveness. And on the very, very top, you wrote competence at the very, very top little triangle thing. And on the very, very right, you wrote empathy. This was originally based on a Harvard study. At Harvard Business School, they took a look at the way we interact with each other. And they realized that most of the time when we are in a room with anyone else, what we're really communicating is really the two main things of competence and empathy. And that's it. It was a shock. It was just like, what? Seriously? Because we were thinking that, we have these personalities. We were doing a study on communication patterns and why it was that certain people got promotions and certain people didn't get promotions. And it was a study talking about, there's a concept called bamboo ceiling, which is why, which shows that Asian Americans oftentimes get promoted to about middle management, but very, very, very few actually get promoted beyond that.
Interesting.
And originally I started taking a look at this as, it's a systemic issue.
Right.
And then the more I looked into it, I realized, wait a second. South Asians didn't have this problem. So East Asians did. South Asians many of them crack open that thing and they become CEOs. Like the CEO of Microsoft, Google is South Asian, for example. And, like the current, I think, Prime Minister of the UK is.
So like Thai, Vietnam.
South Asian is India.
India.
So India.
Okay.
Yeah. Which a lot of times in North America, we don't even associate that with Asians.
Yeah.
But East Asians didn't. So we started taking a look at that and we said, okay, well, how are we, because the way we communicate who we are is the way we communicate who we are to ourselves. So anytime that we're communicating outwardly, we're also communicating inwardly. Yeah. And what we're saying, this is why we have that saying, is that like, be careful what you say because you're always listening, right? So we looked at the Harvard study on where it was that people were placing these two metrics of competence and empathy. And there goes the drill again.
The drill's back.
I think it's just punctuating our points here.
Yeah.
And we realized that the framework that we communicate with ourselves really comes down to those three things. How self-accepting we are is our assertiveness. How comfortable we are with what we do in the world, our purpose, is our competence. And then how connected we are to one another in relationships is our empathy. And we started realizing that when you really broke down that big Asian energy or that confidence or that sense of self-possessiveness, it's not always about who's the loudest in the room. It's not always about who is, who seems the most powerful or the most dominant. It's really just where are they in those three things and how much they own themselves in those three things. Like you find that we started tracking this around some of the most, so we did studies and you could see the people who are most admired. We looked at all these studies on the most admired people on the list. And basically what it came down to is they all had a sense of assertiveness. They all had a sense of self-ownership and their competence. Like they know what they're about and they know what they're good at. And they're empathetic and they're caring. And across the board, that was this magic number. When somebody possesses all three of those traits, they immediately have that magic, charismatic magneticism.
So why the bamboo ceiling for East Asians? What were they missing from this?
Great question. It came down to they were almost always missing one of those three in those kind of profiles. So we saw people who were highly competent, those intellectuals, who were really, really good at what they did, but they didn't know how to assert themselves. So they became, the quote unquote nerdy guys, right? Like that portrayal that exists because there's a lot of us who grew up. I was that person who was just like, I'm really good at what I do. I'm going to stay in my lane, but I didn't know how to assert myself. There's too much of that nice guy energy. And then there were people who on the opposite side, they were just too empathetic. And they didn't have that backbone to kind of say that thing. And what we discovered was that for whatever reason, that group of South Asians, the way they communicated was just much more naturally assertive. And at the same time, they were able to communicate on an empathetic level. I'm really overgeneralizing here.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to be clear about this: is that we're overgeneralizing. We're only really talking about those specific people. And I also do recognize that there are absolutely systemic issues at play. But ultimately, that's not my zone of expertise.
Yep.
So I'm going to leave that to much smarter people than myself to tackle. What I'm talking about is how do we rise to our ace energy?
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, it makes sense to me that culturally you're going to have, if you look at a large group of people from a different part of the world, you're going to see they show up a little bit differently, right? And then you take that, if you take some of those people and you put them over here, there's going to be, let's say, they're not going to be a great fit in some way for the way that culture is set up.
Totally.
Right? They're going to struggle to succeed in some way because of where they came from and their assets, whereas other assets will actually be assets.
Well, the analogy I like to use, just to sidestep any confusion around this, this is not a racial dispute. It's a cultural dispute.
Yeah.
Because if you take a look at Japan, like I love using this as an example, like if you are doing business in Japan, you'll see like CEOs will bow to one another and they'll even bow to their employees. And that makes perfect sense in that culture.
Yep.
But if you took that same CEO who was bowing and you took him to a business negotiation in New York, that bow has a very different meaning.
Yeah.
So that's the cultural communication that we oftentimes look at.
Yeah.
Right?
It'd be submission, essentially.
It'd be exactly.
Right?
So what there's, we saw that these are like the Asian American myths, is that things are oftentimes misinterpreted in that translation.
Yeah, what you say here makes a lot of sense. Like if you think about in the business world, at least in North America, if you are competent and empathetic, that's great. You might be great at your job and great at connecting with other people at the office. But if you're not assertive, you're not going to climb the corporate ladder in the same way.
Yeah. Not leadership material is oftentimes what our clients say.
Yeah. This really pisses off the people who are super competent in their job, because the assertive guys who are not as competent will climb up and end up being their boss, right? And I know guys like this, like they're like, they're genius.
It's frustrating for them. I so empathize with them.
Yeah.
I had a client, because I do a lot of the people I coach, they're in corporations and they're trying to break free that bamboo ceiling.
Yeah.
And there's this guy, he was so frustrated because his boss is always like, why you gotta be so shy? And he's like, we're not shy. We just have high standards. And he was so mad. He's just like, look, the reason I'm not speaking up in the meeting is because, what Brad over there is saying just wasn't that interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm like, yeah, but he's saying it.
Yeah, it's just his opinion and he's just throwing it out there and he doesn't necessarily even really know if he's right or not.
Yeah. And you're smarter. Like, why are you holding back what you're saying? You should be the one speaking up, because then that helps everyone. And
it makes sense. Yeah, because Brad over there actually probably needs to be more competent. Right? And he needs to rebalance his
so
triangle.
he needs more C on the ace triangle.
Yeah. Whereas this guy needs more
you need a little bit more assertiveness.
Yeah. So do you think that like if a person was to focus just on 3 things in their life, that they could focus on ace? And
honestly, like finding a backbone is what we, that's the colloquial way. Ace really is about self-acceptance. It's like you are fully self-accepting of who you are. That's what assertiveness really comes down to, is you're willing to speak up because you see something in the world and you don't feel afraid of exerting that. And competence is, you know, what we all kind of strive for, being better at what we do, being better at our jobs.
Yeah.
And then the last one is empathy. Is, are you communicating and connecting with people? Because the funny thing is, A and C can make for a good leader, but they're not good long-term leaders, because we just don't, like, we can respect somebody who is that commander status, who has high assertiveness and high competence level, but over time we have a hard time trusting them.
Yeah. I was listening to Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson on my way over here.
Yeah.
And Jordan was talking about how around 4% of the population would fit the bill for psychopathy.
Okay.
And he was talking about how a system that is built like ours is here in Canada and Vancouver allows for psychopaths to flourish at some level, because there's a level of freedom in the system. And a psychopath can have great assertiveness and great competence, but no empathy. But you can survive well in the corporate world. You can survive well in universities. Like there's a lot of systems where a psychopath can actually survive well. But what you're saying is correct. Is like, they don't last forever.
No.
They end up being exposed. And so that empathy piece, I guess what I'm getting to is like the empathy piece is really important.
Yeah.
And, not just for the psychopaths to figure out how to have empathy, because I'm not sure how to get them to do that. I don't work with psychopaths.
Yeah, those 4%.
Yeah, I usually just turn away and try to work with someone else, because that seems like
All
a really hard project. But for the other 96% of us, empathy is a really interesting one, because I just don't hear a lot about like, hey, like, work on your empathy. How do you work on your empathy? And as a new parent of a little girl, I'm realizing I have a lot of empathy, and I got some work to do still, for sure. My wife would definitely agree. How do you work on your empathy? How do you grow that part of the triangle? I mean, there's probably people out there listening to this who are like, actually, yeah, like I've got the A and the C pretty good at work. Yeah. And here we are saying like, hey, well, if you work on that empathy side, that might be the ticket for you. So what do you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, actually, I guess this is a plug. I do have a little booklet with like a bunch of like tips and tricks of like, you know, we talk about priming language. It could be as simple as just the way you write your emails. Use more collectivist nouns like we and us, and a little bit more emotional language. Like, oh, I'm so excited for our call. Instead of being like, just a quick confirmation of our call at 2:00, be like, I'm looking forward to our call at 2:00. These are the things that, you know, I'm excited to chat about with you. And like something as simple as that primes people. Yeah. And then in our everyday conversation, it really is like, we all know that person who's like really like that boss who's like really hard to get to know. And then you go for a drink with them after work, and they, you know, like they're just sitting there and they're having a drink, and they're kind of like, you know, I gotta be honest, like it's just been a trying season. Like I'm trying my best here. Sometimes I get concerned that we're not going to hit that mark.
Yeah. They open up. And like that 1%, like that's really all it takes. That's a really funny thing is we're not talking about, people think that when we say empathy, you have to like cry in front of people. Like, no. Just like, like crack that door a little bit, share a little bit of vulnerability, and people immediately connect. And we go, oh, right. Like I can see that. That's all it really takes. It's so small. We do a lot of men's work, you and I. Yeah. And one of the most common things I'm sure you've heard, especially in relationships, is women who are talking about their men. They're like, what? I just wish he'd talk about his feelings more. Yeah. Yeah. And whenever men come to me, I hear about this where we work with men, like, they're like, what does she want? Like, for me to have like a breakdown? And the answer is no. Just occasionally talk about what you're experiencing. Yeah. I like to use like give them the sit rep, like, you know, like military term, like a situation report, like give them a sit rep. Yeah. Like, what was your day like? Yeah. Does something annoy you? Share that. That's it. Yeah. Like 1%. That's what builds empathy, because once we go, oh, and then ask people about their day and just go, yeah, take a breath. I understand. Yeah. I'm really like, try to get them. Yeah. Just listen. Try to get that person.
Yeah.
That really nurtures empathy. And there's a word that is used a lot called attunement, right? Which it's very much related to empathy, because it's this feeling of like, I get you, or like, I'm tuned into what it's like to be you. And it's really important for parents, between parents and children, but it's also really important in relationship, like that you're sort of bridging that gap between the two of you, what it's like to be me and what it's like to be you. Like, oh, I really kind of want to get and want to feel what it's like to be you right now. And like, oh, you're having this feeling right now. Like, I'm going to breathe that in, and I'm going to like just feel that with you for a minute. What's it like to be sad? What's it like to, you know, my daughter was crying last night, and me and her mom just sat there and just felt with her. We cried too, you know? And there's nothing we could fix or do or whatever. She just needed to be held. You know, we didn't even know what was wrong. She's freaking 4 months old. She can't tell us what's wrong. Everything mechanically seemed fine. So it was like,
you got sleep.
just feel with her. And I've had to learn to do that with my partner. Is like, take those moments to try to understand what it's like to be her and to feel the weight of what it's like to be her. Right. And communicate that some way. It doesn't even have to be with words. It might just be with like a hand on the back and the way I look at her. But just this sense of like, I get you. Because truthfully, most of the time, the way that I'm cruising around as a dude in the house, she doesn't really feel, I actually don't get her. And like, we are different, you know?
Oh, for sure.
This is why we, you know, like to pair up, because we're actually quite different. We want a lot of the same things in the world, and we have a lot of the same ideals, but I don't get her a lot of the time. And what she's seeking though is that connection from time to time, like where I do get her. You know, I think a lot of guys need to hear that like, you don't need to just, she's always going to want more from you. You know, it's,
and that's not
what
a bad
we
thing.
want.
That's a challenge that as men we should have, right?
We always want, you always want more from the world, don't you? You know? So, you know, your partner's always going to want more from you. It doesn't mean that you're not good enough, right? That's another story we're carrying around.
Oh, for sure.
Right. And so, how can you just learn to connect on her level, right?
Like
learn to get curious about her.
Three statements that if we learn to say, and that's all it really takes, and people always come back, is one is, tell me more. Before you give the feedback, as men, we just want to fix everything, right? Somebody tells us something, we just want to like, let me fix it for you. They're like,
I
no,
got
no,
a solution.
Sit there. Be like, no, just tell me more. The other thing is, that must feel, oh man. And just whatever it is you think like you would feel in that situation, like, oh, that must feel so frustrating. Like that's so simple without solving. Most people don't need solving. Like most people don't need fixing. Most people just want to be seen, heard, and understood. Right. And then I get that. I hear you. I get that. I hear that. That's really like, if we just learn those three phrases and practice that more often, people will suddenly be like, Jason, he just seems like, I just really like him. He's just so warm, and that's all it takes.
We just had such a great conversation. I think I talked the whole time. But I really like him.
Like he really gets me. Like I just feel like we're on the same level. That's so easy sometimes.
There's other pieces I think around empathy that you could use to grow and expand that. And for me, it's like that personal journey of connecting to your own heart and your own inner child.
If we're diving deep with that, absolutely. Doing your own work. Doing your own work.
And for me, it's usually like powerful things that kind of knock me on my ass. Psychedelics, breath work.
You know,
dance actually can be really, really expansive.
I've never seen you dance. We got to go dancing sometime.
Come to Base Coast, buddy.
Base Coast, is it?
Come to Base Coast.
I haven't danced in a long time.
The brothers, the Arca brothers last year at Base Coast, I'm telling you, dude.
Pictures.
We had the experience of what it's like to be on the dance floor with a bunch of dudes you've done the work with, and you just feel so tight with them, and to have a posse of women with us who felt really safe and supported, and like they weren't being pursued constantly, and like they were protected from, like we had this like shield around us with them, and we were just there was this energy that we got from each other. Man, it's so good. Music festivals, there's two things that I recommend to guys in our brotherhood that if they really want to sort of step out of their comfort zone. One is that they come to one of our in-person weekends, which, those things are like 48 hours of just an energetic system that is so different from the normal world. It just drops you back into your nature, your beast energy, the bonding with other men, your heart, all of that.
It breaks down your armor and builds you back up stronger.
And music festivals.
Okay.
Like music festivals changed me, man. I went to my first one, like my first real good one that wasn't super corporate, when I was like 28. And I went sober for like 5 years. Just no additional things, and just practiced, dancing. Like what's it like to just be surrounded by people and surrounded by music on these like 360 stages. Close your eyes and just feel the music and let it move through you. And like you can go to ecstatic dance in your own town. There's ecstatic dance everywhere, but that's a 2-hour experience that you go home at the end of the night. But when you go to a festival, it's like 3 or 4 or 5 days of just the same over and over. Wow. And so it's just like, get up, eat, go dance, come home, fuel up, put on a different costume, go dance. And so you're working deeper and deeper into this, through this like resistance, I think, that we all have to really truly being in our bodies and like just feeling what music does to you, and letting it move you. It's like, that's, if you want to work on your lover archetype, go there, man.
Dive deeper. Okay. I'm sold, man. I'm sold on the next on the next train. Go dancing.
Bring your big Asian energy to Base Coast. Let's go.
Let's go.
Great, man. Geez, I feel like we should finish with a story. Yeah. Is there a story that comes to mind as a result of this last hour of conversation? Is there something that feels like the best one to share?
I mean, my usual go-to story is the terrorist story, because that one is like the
how you got mistaken for a terrorist.
Because that I think was always this, like, the core story of this whole journey of everything that I do.
Let's hear it.
Or there's a story about kindness, which I think is big. I was just chatting with a friend about kindness today, and I really I believe that kindness is like the secret to all things. Yeah,
let's go kindness.
Yeah,
good.
Okay, that feels good. Yeah, so I don't know if you know this, but scientifically, like from an actual neurological level, there's actually only 4 things in the world that actually truly gives us happiness. So we create meaning and stories that gives us happiness and joy and everything like that. But there's, scientifically speaking, there's actually only 4. And those 4 is our exercise, physical exercise that literally creates the happiness chemicals. Yep. Maybe dancing at Base Coast. Yep. The second one is gratitude, right? Like deep physical, deep connective gratitude practices that regularly builds it. The third one, I want to say love, because I'm blanking on the actual answer. Somebody please go look this up.
Anyway, where's young Jamie?
Yeah, exactly. Somebody who has better.
Young Jamie, where are you, bud?
Yeah. But the fourth one actually is kindness. And so for a few years, I created a company called One Kindness, and the purpose of which was to get people to do an act of kindness every day for 30 days, and to change your life. Yeah, because I had done it. As my own personal experiment, as one of these things that I did, and it was one of the most powerful experiments that I had. So the story behind that was, I was in Nepal, and I just come down from this like random like sky, it's called ultralight, these little planes that you ride on, these kind of little things. Yeah. And I was dropped in the middle of nowhere, and I was essentially stranded and this little cart pull up and offer me a ride. This was a time where Nepal was going through a gas crisis, that they were literally like running, like people line up 4 hours to get a small tank of gas.
Wow.
So it was not a small thing that he had picked me up and, had offered to drive me back to the hotel. And later on, when I was chatting with his partner, his wife, I found out that he was actually driving the opposite direction to drop me off. So I felt really bad about that. And I was like, this is like, oh my God, like, thank you so much and everything like that. So by the time we stopped, I was trying to pay him money. I was trying to say, like, let me buy you something. And he refused none of it. Like, he wouldn't even let me buy him dinner. And when I asked why, he was just looking at me, just like, I do this for me, not you. And ever since then, I think this has been a core thing that I really look at is kindness. It's such a simple and misunderstood concept that we see in the world. And when I say that is that we hear a lot of words like be kind to yourself, be kind to other people. But I don't think we realize just how deeply powerful kindness is. There's two things. When we're kind to other people, we are actively, especially doing a small random act of kindness that has an immediate effect of positivity. There's a part of our nervous system called the vagus nerve. And it is it's the part that produces all the happiness chemicals that our body goes through. And the more we experience it, actually, it helps everything else with our body. It helps our cardiovascular systems. It helps us, it helps with our stress levels, lower cortisol levels, all these amazing things. And in the year that I was practicing daily acts of kindness, I was shocked at how much love I was constantly feeling.
Right.
And all it took was every single day, go out there and do one small act. Sometimes just buying a random person a cup of coffee. Sometimes it's taking the time to write out a small note and leaving it for somebody like a friend or your partner.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things where it was the 1% that got 1,000% back.
To be the cynic, do you think that can be it can be chalked up to you were just feeling really good about yourself because you're such a good guy? Right? Because people might argue that, like, yeah, sort of acts of kindness, like it's a way of pumping up your own ego, like, look how good I am. And that's why you're feeling great about it.
I love that. Great question. So the answer to be a deeper cynic, to out-cynic the cynic, is the secret to all this, is to do it with absolutely zero expectations of anything back, and being honest with yourself that you are giving for the joy of giving.
Yeah.
In other words, if you're doing it because you're doing it for the Instagram, you've missed the point.
Yeah.
It's kind of like taking a picture but not eating the meal. The joy from getting to do something for other people comes from you saying, I'm only doing this because I want to hit that joy trigger. So yeah, do it selfishly.
Yes.
And unapologetically selfishly. And go do it for everyone you run into. Compliment the next person you see on the fact that you love their scarf. Go up to somebody and buy a little cake. Like, I love doing is go to like a coffee chain nearby your home or a mom and pop's place. Buy a little cupcake and give it to somebody who looks like they're having a tough day. Right. Tiny things, and do it specifically selfishly for you. That is the secret.
I love that the guy who gave you that ride in Nepal owned that. With you. He said, no, I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for me.
Oh man.
Right? This is like basic kind of shadow work.
Yeah.
It's like what I was pointing out as the cynic was the shadow. Kindness, right? It was like, because people will do that. Right. And then they're sort of owned by that image of being nice. And it's this sort of futile, empty status that they get. Yeah. Right. But if you actually own that, like, no, this, like, I do this because you're me in another body and I'm loving me by loving you.
Yeah.
You're sort of owning that shadow and reclaiming it, and it becomes this sort of whole thing.
100%. Yeah. Go do acts of kindness. Tell nobody about it.
And see how it feels.
And just love the process.
Yeah.
Love the process. If there's one life hack that I'm like, this is going to change your world. This is it.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's also amazing how when you're looking for that, like, I don't know if you noticed this, but when you started looking for potential acts of kindness, you started finding them everywhere, and you started finding people who needed help and people who needed a word or whatever. And I have noticed that too, that when I'm in that mindset, I can see things that I wouldn't normally see because I got my head down and I'm sort of worrying about myself. I remember years ago when I was a new Airbnb host, Airbnb was also a relatively new company, and they were blowing up and they had lots of money, and they just sent $10 to every host. They just sent $10 to everybody and said, hey, go do something nice for somebody.
I love it.
With this.
Yeah.
And so I was in West Van somewhere, and I went into a coffee place, or I went to get like a smoothie bowl. There's places up there that do those acai bowls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, so good.
And I was like looking for someone to spend my money on. And I saw this lady come in who she asked about the different things, and I could see in her, she found out how much it was, and then she said, I'm just going to get like a water or something. Like, she didn't buy anything. Yeah. And I was like, oh, there it is. There's my opportunity. Yeah. And I was like, I just went and bought her a bowl and then gave it to her.
Beautiful.
And she was so stoked.
Beautiful.
And I felt really good just being able to feed her.
How incredibly generous, amazing, loving, selfish of you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That feels so good. Yeah.
That must have felt amazing.
Yeah. And well, I still remember it because I just remember like what it did to me.
Yeah.
You know, like I was giving away not my money, but I was looking for that opportunity, and then
you could have kept it.
Yeah.
You could have kept it.
Totally.
But here's the thing, like that's the thing. Drop the scorekeeping. Like, we get so caught up. I remember that there was an episode of Friends that was talking about this, where it's just like, well, if it helps you, then it doesn't count. Like, who cares? And it doesn't count. What do you mean it doesn't count? Did you feel good about it? Great. Then it counts.
Then it counts.
Yeah.
Yeah. If that's the goal.
Yeah.
Right.
And you might be like, well, it's not big enough. Like, you're a millionaire. You only give away who cares? Did you enjoy it? Like, that's the whole point, is drop the score. Like, we're so caught up in I got to do it at this level, or it's got to look like this, or it doesn't count. If I got to build a school, no, just do it and do it for yourself.
Take action. This is what I love about you, is that you're just like, hey man, like, it doesn't have to be perfect. Like, what's important is some measurement, obviously. Measurement and then execution.
Yeah,
so many people miss the execution piece in their lives because they're not ready, or because they don't know exactly what to do. Yeah. But like, when you're writing a nice note for your friend who's having a hard day, or you're buying a cupcake for somebody, all you got to do is execute.
Do it imperfectly.
Right?
Yeah.
Just do it.
Do it imperfectly.
Yeah, that's great. I'm really glad to get this background, because honestly, the first email I ever got from you years ago was like John at thatkindnessguy.com.
This guy must be like the most conceited person ever.
Yeah, I was like, what's that kindness guy?
Yeah, that was probably around the time that I was running One Kindness. Yeah, man.
That's cool to get that background. Thanks, man. So this was great. We could surely do this again and get into more subject matter. You're a big deal on TikTok. I'm chasing you. You've got way more content out there than I have, but how can people find you and work with you?
Yeah. At John Wang Official on Instagram, because there's 42,000 other John Wangs on there. I looked it up.
Yeah.
It's literally 42,000.
Yeah.
So John Wang Official on Instagram, or if you're on TikTok, it's John Wang BAE, which stands for Big Asian Energy. John Wang Bay.
John Wang Bay.
Or just come check it out. If you want to check out Big Asian Energy, bigasianenergy.co. We have cool t-shirts and we have cool programs.
Tell me a little bit about the programs.
So we're the intention, the mission of what we're doing is we're creating training and videos and content, and I'm doing speaking to help Asian people step into their big Asian energy, that confidence, that sense of self-assuredness, and really like that deep sense of self-love. So we built a program for the men. We have a special program that goes through 4 stages, what we call Dragon Born, Dragon Rise, Dragon Soar, and Dragon Kingdom, which sounds really cool.
Yeah. Cool.
And it's really more of a personal development program specifically for men.
Yeah, wicked.
Yeah.
That's great, man.
Yeah, come check us out.
Okay. John Wang, it's a pleasure, man.
Heck yeah. I
Thanks for
also, I was just like, I just want to say how much I love this and how much I love you. Yeah. I really appreciate having known you. I mean, we've known each other for now, like, how long now?
It must be 5 years or so.
Longer
at least.
than that.
Yeah.
At least that. I want to say 6 or
I
7.
met Shalina like 8 years ago. Yeah. So maybe
yeah,
6.
Yeah, 6 years. Yeah. And I love what you're doing. I love the leadership that you claim and what you're putting out in the world. Yeah. I feel like more men should say I love you to each other.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
So I love you.
Yeah. I love you too. Yeah, I love you too, man. Yeah, and I'm grateful to have made the trip over here to do this episode, to be recording live, and I got some stories out of you, man.
Woo!
And that's what I wanted. So
Nice.
It's good to know you, brother. Thanks for coming on. All right, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the podcast. If you liked this episode, please hit the like button and the subscribe button. And if there's somebody who would be impacted by this episode, please share it with them. If you're a man who's interested in working on his relationships and wants to do a course with me, I've got a 12-week course called the Conscious Relationship Council that focuses on giving men the relationship tools that they need to succeed. If you're interested in that, that's on my website at evolvingman.com. I also run a circle for men focused on addiction recovery. And if you're interested in that, there's a link in my bio on my Instagram that you can click to fill out a form, or you can send me a message through my website. Thanks, folks, for liking, subscribing, for spreading the message. All the best to you.